It started with a call, one I should have let go to voicemail. But when Ophelia's name lit up my phone, I answered. I always did. Blaze, I hate to ask this, but can Laz stay with you? Just for a few weeks. His contractor's delayed and he's stuck until the foundation gets poured. My jaw clenched. Her voice was sugar over guilt, something she'd perfected over the years. I looked around the living room, quiet and familiar. The old hardwood creaked as I shifted in my chair. This house, our parents' house, had been my anchor for years. After Dad passed and Mom followed, I'd stayed behind while everyone else moved forward. Ophelia had a husband and a house on the hill. Roman, our middle brother, had a startup in Portland. Me? I kept the lights on here, paid the taxes, fixed the plumbing, held it all together. You don't have to say yes, she added, as if that changed anything. I said yes. I always did. Later that evening, I started cleaning the guest room. Sheets fresh from the dryer, corners tucked military tight. I set out a clean towel, refolded it twice, even lit a damn candle. Not because Laz deserved it, but because Mom would have done it that way. And somewhere in me, I still lived by her playbook. I told myself it was just temporary, and I believed it, for about 16 hours. Laz arrived like a puffed-up rooster, pulling up in a brand-new Ram truck that barely fit the driveway. He slammed the door with theatrical flair and strutted toward the house with sunglasses on, despite the overcast sky. "Blaze," he called out like we were long-lost friends. "Still holding down the fort, huh?" His cologne hit me before he did. Too much, too sharp. He hugged me like he was doing me a favor. Then he looked around like he was inspecting a motel he'd read bad Yelp reviews about. "Place looks the same," he said with a grin that wasn't really a grin. "Still haven't knocked out that wall, huh?" "Nope," I replied, hand on the doorframe. "Didn't see the need." Sure, minimalist charm." He walked in like he owned the place. Dropped his keys on my coffee table. Turned on the TV without asking. Cranked up the volume like it was his living room. Then he pulled out his phone and started a speaker call. "Yeah, babe, I'm here. Yeah, it's quaint." He winked at me mid-call. Laz unloaded his bags, plural, stuffed with designer shirts and cologne bottles. His suitcase wheels left marks on the floor. I watched him roll it right into the guest room. Then another. "Bringing the whole closet," I tried to joke. "You know me, man. Gotta look sharp, even in exile," he said, laughing like we were in on some private joke. By dinner time, I was already retreating into silence. At bedtime, I went to check the guest room, only to find his duffel on the bed, a cologne bottle on the nightstand, and a handwritten note taped to the door. "Hope you don't mind using the laundry room. It's just for a bit." For a long while, I stood there staring at the note like it would change. Maybe it was a joke, a weird tone-deaf prank. I knocked. "Hey, Laz, what's this?" He opened the door in a robe, my father's old robe, and waved at the note. "Oh, just easier, you know. I spread out a bit. Figured you'd be cool with it. Laundry room's just off the kitchen. Easy access." I didn't laugh. I didn't even nod. He did. "Man, don't look so serious. It's temporary." He closed the door before I could say anything else. The laundry room smelled like detergent and old socks. The floor was cold. No bed, just a collapsible cot I hadn't seen in years. There were boxes stacked in the corner. Mom's Christmas stuff, Dad's old records. I set the cot up. It creaked like a bad memory. I sat on it, stared up at the cracked ceiling where a single bulb flickered overhead. Somewhere in the walls, the water heater hummed like a forgotten lullaby. Memories crept in, hand-me-down shoes, split desserts, promises of next time that never came. I was always the one who got what was left, who made do, who didn't complain. I texted Ophelia. "Seriously, he kicked me to the laundry room." She replied 5 minutes later. "I'm sorry. He's under a lot of stress. Please, just give him a little grace." Grace. I'd given grace so many times I should have started charging rent for it. This was my house, my floorboards, my late nights fixing the roof. And yet here I was, back in the margins. I lay back on the cot, the metal pressing into my spine, and whispered into the dark, "Is this who I still am to them?" Rain tapped on the window like an impatient visitor. I'd barely slept, the cot digging into my back like an accusation. I needed coffee. Something warm, something mine. As I stepped into the kitchen, the sound hit me first. Laz's booming laugh through speakerphone, his voice slicing through the quiet like a blade. He stood barefoot in front of the stove, flipping eggs like it was his weekend retreat. Yeah, babe, no, it's like a man cave. Except the troll lives upstairs, he said, chuckling into his phone. I paused. Troll. He spotted me and grinned. Morning, Blaze. Didn't know you were still sleeping in the boiler room. I didn't respond. My eyes scanned the space. The spice rack was rearranged. My favorite mug, the one with the faded yellow sun, was gone. A glance toward the donation box on the counter confirmed it. I moved a few things around. Hope that's cool, Laz said, not looking at me. Efficiency, you know? Ophelia entered, hair still damp, holding her phone like a lifeline. She caught my eye, smiled tight. Don't mind him. He's just trying to help. I forced a nod, my hands curling into fists at my sides. The room felt smaller, hotter. And then I noticed the security camera, mounted by the door, was now pointed toward the living room, no longer the porch. I hadn't moved it. They had. It wasn't even about the eggs or the mug. It was about presence. His was everywhere now, loud, sprawling, unapologetic. Mine was vanishing, like fog under morning sun. That afternoon, I went to do laundry, trying to reclaim some sliver of routine. The detergent was gone, replaced with a bottle labeled Fresh Cedar. My generic brand tossed in the trash. I stared at it for a long time. Laughter echoed from the living room. I hadn't been told about company. 4 men, 1 woman, none I recognized, sprawled across my couch, drinking beers from my fridge. Laz was in the center, playing host like he'd owned the place since the Nixon era. Where's that guy you said lived in the laundry closet? One man asked. Laz chuckled. Probably in there folding his socks. Ophelia was there too, not laughing, but not stopping it either. I didn't say anything, just walked out to the garage, needing air. My toolbox was open, tools missing, others scattered across the bench like forgotten toys. Not a single word had been said. I asked Ophelia about it later. Blaze, come on, don't make a thing out of everything, she sighed. It's just temporary. I stared at her. You know that's not the point. She crossed her arms. Then what is the point? That you don't like Laz? That you want drama? I want respect. And I want peace, she snapped. Stop acting like this house makes you king of anything. The words hit me harder than I expected. Later that evening, I sat on the back porch. The cold crept through my sleeves, but I didn't move. In 12 years, I kept this place afloat. I fixed what broke, paid what came due, fought off the bank twice, and yet here I was, playing guest in my own home. I tried to set boundaries the next morning, sat them both down at the kitchen table. I need my tools left alone. I need notice before people come over, and I'm not living in a laundry room while guests sleep in my bed. Ophelia scoffed. You're being hostile. Laz leaned back. Man, what happened to you? Used to be easygoing. Used to be respected, I muttered. Ophelia stood. You never moved on, Blaze. You're still here, in this house, like time forgot you. Laz built something. You inherited. I didn't answer. There was no winning this. I remembered something Dad used to say. A quiet man builds everything they walk on, until someone louder claims they did. That night, I went looking for his old toolbox. Found it shoved under the stairwell, dusty and half empty. Like him, like me, carved out of our own space. I stood there in silence, fingers tracing the worn wood. Then I went to check the mail, and there it was, an envelope, thick, urgent, addressed to Ophelia. The bank's seal stamped in red across the front. I turned it over slowly, my breath caught halfway up my throat. Was this move ever meant to be temporary? The house was quiet that evening, except for the rain. It had been falling since dusk, steady and rhythmic, the kind that makes you believe the world outside has been washed away. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a letter I hadn't meant to open. It was addressed to Ophelia, but the word urgent, printed in red beside the bank's logo, had caught my eye. I told myself I was just making sure it wasn't something that needed my attention. I'd been managing this house for years, keeping the lights on, paying the property tax, maintaining the roof. It's still my responsibility, I thought. But when I unfolded the letter, the words on the page hit me like cold metal. Property Ownership Verification Notice. Primary title holder, Lazarus Draycott. I blinked, then read it again, and again, The rain seemed louder now. I felt my pulse in my ears. My name wasn't anywhere. I tried to reason with it. Maybe it was a clerical mistake. Maybe they had switched records. But no, the dates lined up. Last spring, that was around the time Ophelia had asked me to sign some insurance updates. I remembered her exact words. It's just paperwork for the policy, Blay. The house still needs your signature since your name's on it. She'd smiled then, warm, reassuring, sisterly. I hadn't even read the pages, just signed them because that's what family does. Now I realized what I'd signed wasn't for insurance, it was for ownership. And the knife I never saw was already twisting. I sat there for a long time, the sound of rain on the roof blending with the hum of the refrigerator. You don't see the knife until it's already twisting, I whispered, not recognizing my own voice. I spent that night replaying every conversation, every casual smile, every thank you that had ever come from Ophelia's mouth. It all felt rehearsed now. Still, I didn't want to confront them yet. I wanted proof. I needed to know exactly what they'd done. I went into the den where my father's old cabinet stood, oak, sturdy, smelling faintly of varnish and memory. Inside were files from decades ago. Property deeds, mortgage receipts, tax statements. I sorted through them carefully, the paper dry and brittle under my fingertips. Then I realized something was missing. Whole pages were gone. The deed itself, part of it, had been removed. Before I could make sense of it, Laz's voice came from behind me. Looking for something, handyman? I stiffened, sliding the letter under a stack of folders. Just fixing a drawer, I said evenly, not turning around. He leaned against the doorframe, beer in hand, that crooked grin on his face. You know, some people just aren't meant to own nice things. It's like giving a dog a diamond. He'll bury it before he realizes what it's worth. He chuckled and walked away, the sound of his boots fading into the hallway. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the effort to stay calm. I whispered to myself, we'll see who owns what. The next morning, I drove through the rain into town. The clouds hung low, gray and heavy, pressing against the mountains in the distance. I pulled into the small community bank my family had used since I was a kid. The bell above the door chimed softly as I walked in. Corbett Halloway, the manager, looked up and smiled. Blaze Winsome. Been a long time. How have you been? I forced a polite nod. Doing all right, Corbett. Just need to check something about my property records. He typed a few keys, humming softly. Then his face changed, brows pulling together, eyes darting back to the screen. It says here the property was re-registered last April under Lazarus Draycott and Ophelia Winsome, he said slowly. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a system glitch. But he didn't. That can't be right, I said, my voice quiet. My father left that house to me. I've lived there all my life. Corbett hesitated, lowering his tone. If you'd like, I can print you the transaction file. It'll show the signatures. I nodded. My throat felt dry. When he handed me the printout, I could already see my name at the bottom before I even looked closely. The signature looked perfect. Too perfect. My handwriting down to the loop on the B, except it wasn't mine. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I pressed my palm against the counter to steady myself. I'm sorry, Blaze, Corbett said gently. It's all been filed and approved. Whatever happened, it's official now. I nodded again, unable to speak. Outside, the air was thick with rain and silence. I climbed into my truck and just sat there, staring through the windshield as drops hit the glass and rolled down in slow, uneven lines. In my head, I heard my father's voice again from years ago when he taught me to sign my first check. A man's signature is his truth, Blaze. Guard it like your name. He'd said it with pride, with that calm certainty that only honest men carry. I hadn't guarded it. I'd handed it over without question to my own sister. It wasn't just betrayal, it was robbery. A quiet, polite kind of robbery that comes with a smile and a family dinner. I unfolded the bank printout and traced the signature again with my thumb. Then I folded it back up and slid it into the glove compartment. The anger in me wasn't wild anymore. It was still focused. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I hadn't dialed in years, Dexter Cole. When he answered, his voice was the same as I remembered, rough, dependable. Blaze, Been a long time. Yeah, I said quietly. I need your help. With what? I looked at the paper one last time, then at the house in the distance that used to be mine. I need to find out how deep this goes. The rain hadn't stopped since yesterday. The house smelled like damp wood and reheated leftovers. I sat at the breakfast table watching the steam rise off my mug, trying not to hear what I knew was coming. Laz strolled in, smirking like he'd already won a game I never agreed to play. He set his coffee down with a loud clink, looked at me and said it clear as day. You can take the laundry room or leave. My hands clenched around the cup. Across the table, two of our neighbors, Gus and Clara, froze mid-chew. Gus's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Clara raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I didn't answer Laz. What was there to say? Ophelia muttered something like, "He's just stressed," her voice barely more than a whisper. No defense, no objection, just air. I stood up, nodded once, and walked to my room. Grabbed a pillow, a folded blanket, a couple of t-shirts, and a pair of socks. The hallway seemed longer than usual, narrower. Like the house was shrinking around me. I walked past the old family photos that still hung in the hall, me at 9 with Dad by the river, Mom laughing in the background. None of it felt like it belonged to me anymore. I stopped outside the laundry room door. The doorknob felt colder than it should have. Inside, the air was heavy with detergent and mildew. The cot Laz had mentioned, a folding metal thing with a mattress thinner than a pancake. I dropped my things, sat down slowly. The springs groaned under my weight. A home is defined by where people refuse to let you go. Later that afternoon, I heard laughter from the living room. I stepped out quietly. Laz was standing next to Seraphine, my mother, holding up a sleek black box. "This," he said, voice rich and sugary, "is a small thank you for everything you've done for me." He opened the box, a glint of silver, a high-end bracelet, real diamonds, if I had to guess. The look on her face, surprised, flattered, and something else, something like loyalty shifting hands. She gave him a soft hug, patted his arm, called him a blessing. I stood in the archway, arms crossed, watching. I thought of the necklace I gave her last year. Simple, modest. She'd smiled, told me it was beautiful, but I never saw her wear it. The house felt different now. The walls leaned away from me. The floor creaked louder beneath my feet. Even the air was colder on my side of the hallway. I walked back to the laundry room. Didn't bother closing the door behind me. What was the point? I lay down on the cot, pulled the blanket up to my chest, stared at the ceiling. The bulb above me flickered, just once, then held steady. I reached for my journal, opened to a fresh page and started writing. Painted the porch, rewired the hallway lights, paid the first year's property tax, mowed the lawn every Saturday. The list went on. The rain picked up again. Hard against the walls, louder than I remembered. I closed my eyes and heard Dad's voice in my head. A home built with love is never rented. A soft knock broke the rhythm. Ophelia stood in the doorway holding a paper cup. "I thought you might want coffee," she said. She didn't step inside. "Thanks," I said, taking it. Lukewarm. Bitter. But I nodded, polite. "I hope you understand," she murmured, before walking off. I didn't answer. The room smelled like wet socks and disappointment. I leaned back, trying to rest. My phone buzzed. One new message. Check the deed history. I sat up straight. A week had passed. Rain still kissed the windows every morning like a reminder that not everything gets to dry out in time. I sat in the laundry room, the cot under me a little more broken in, the air a little more stale. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. Then it lit up. Dexter's message read, "Forgery confirmed. Signature doesn't match previous documents. Sending full report soon." I didn't flinch, just read it again and again until it sank into my spine. I had been right. My gut hadn't failed me. But this wasn't a moment for celebration. This was chess. Quiet moves, long game. That night at dinner, I waited until everyone was halfway through their food. Ophelia stirred her soup absently. Laz was bragging about a client he conned into overpaying. "So," I said casually, "I was looking at some of Dad's old paperwork. Something's off with the deed signature." The silence lasted less than 2 seconds. Ophelia cut in fast, tight. Let's not start with that again. Laz chuckled. You always see ghosts in the attic, Blaze. I smiled. Maybe, or maybe I just know where the mold grows. He blinked, just once, then went back to his wine. I didn't push, not yet. That night I opened a folder on my laptop, started a timeline, saved screenshots, voice memos, anything I could use later, I recorded quietly. Dates, quotes, photos of Laz smiling where he shouldn't have been, documents that had my father's name, but not his handwriting. Sometimes it's not the roar that wins the war, it's the silence between teeth. 3 days later, I found my name scraped off the family mailbox. In its place, a clean silver sticker that read, Draycott Residence. As if I'd never lived there. I didn't say anything, just stared at it a while, then walked back around the house. The garden I used to keep, daffodils, rosemary, creeping thyme, had been flattened. Gravel replaced the soil. A sign now stood in the corner, no trespassing. It was new, fresh paint, Laz's work. Inside, I found the thermostat locked at 65. I shivered, checked the fridge. Half the groceries I'd bought were gone, replaced with Laz's expensive snacks. Ophelia looked up from her seat on the couch. Do you need something? She asked, more out of politeness than care. Just some space, I replied. You always say that. I leaned against the doorway. I know something's wrong. You feel it too. She hesitated. You're being paranoid again. Paranoid again. Like that time I told her someone had taken her favorite scarf and she found it days later in Laz's coat pocket, but still claimed I was imagining things. I turned and walked away. That night, I opened an old notebook, flipped to a childhood memory. Ophelia's music box. She'd broken it. I took the blame so she wouldn't lose her birthday present from Dad. She cried and said, I'll never forget this. I'll always protect you. I closed the notebook. That promise was worth less than the gravel in the front yard now. It was almost midnight when I passed Laz's study. The door was cracked. He was on the phone. Yeah, man, it was too easy. Moved in, gave her some jewelry, played the sweet son-in-law. Now I've got the whole top floor. And Blaze, he's doing laundry in his sleep. Laughter. I stepped in. His head snapped up. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch. I just said, enjoy the top floor while you can. You won't be in it long. He smirked, but didn't laugh this time. And I didn't wait for him to reply. I walked back to the laundry room with a focus I hadn't felt in months. The cot creaked again, same sound, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't hiding in this room anymore. I was waiting, watching. The next morning, a manila envelope was under the door, no return address. On the front, in black ink, thought you'd want to see this. D. It began on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The kind where the house smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish, and the rain outside had started to thin into a drizzle. The living room was filled with small talk and the sound of dishes clinking. Mother had invited the neighbors over, something she hadn't done since Dad's funeral. Laz moved through the room like he owned it, shaking hands, pouring drinks, laughing at stories he didn't live through. I stood near the window, keeping mostly to myself. Then Mother rose from her chair, holding her glass as if she were at a ceremony. Before everyone goes, she said, I just want to say how thankful I am for Lazarus. He's brought stability back into this family. He's given us structure again. A few guests nodded, smiled. I heard someone murmur, that's nice. But all I could hear was the crack in her voice when she said stability. She'd used that word once for me, back when Dad was gone and I took on everything he left behind. Laz placed his hand lightly on her shoulder, playing the part. I'm just happy to help where I can. This place means a lot to me, he said, flashing that modest grin that always made people trust him. Mother smiled up at him as if he'd earned the roof over her head. You've done more than help, Laz. You've made us stronger. My chest tightened. Stronger. Stability. Words that used to define me, now they were his. I kept my face steady, smiled where I was supposed to. A few people glanced at me awkwardly, realizing what wasn't being said. An older neighbor, Mrs. Graham, leaned toward me and whispered, I didn't even recognize you in the new family photo they sent out. Her words felt heavier than she meant them. I managed a polite, yeah, things change. Inside, something shifted. Quiet, sharp, final. That night, when everyone was gone and the laughter had drained from the house, I found Mother in her study. The same study where Dad used to handle bills and draw up plans for the property. She was sitting by the desk, sorting through envelopes. "Mom," I said softly, "we need to talk." She looked up, startled, then tried to soften her tone. "If this is about dinner, it's about everything," I interrupted. "You stood there and thanked him. You said he made this family stronger. You realize what that means, don't you?" Her fingers hesitated on a stack of papers. "Blaze, you're reading too much into it." "No, I'm not. You didn't just praise him, you erased me." She sighed. "I didn't erase you. I just acknowledged that Laz has done good things for this family. Things you couldn't." That one landed. I stepped closer, forcing myself to stay calm. "What's that supposed to mean?" She looked tired, older somehow. "Years ago, when your father passed, I worried. You took on too much. The repairs, the bills, the property taxes. I didn't think you could sustain it. I thought maybe selling was the only way to keep us safe." "Safe from what? From me?" "From losing everything," she snapped, then softened again. "Laz came with experience, connections. He offered help when no one else did. I thought maybe he could guide you." "Guide me?" I let out a short breath. "He took over, Mom. You let him." Her eyes darted away. "Maybe I did. Maybe I thought he'd be a safer choice than my own son." The room went quiet. I stared at her, realizing that unconditional love, the kind you believe exists between a mother and son, had been replaced by something fragile and transactional. "You didn't lose faith in me," I said quietly. "You sold it." She flinched. I waited for her to deny it. She didn't. I turned toward the door. "I hope stability keeps you warm, Mom," I said, and left before she could answer. In the hallway, I caught sight of our old family picture, Dad's hand on my shoulder, Mother smiling, Ophelia's little grin. Laz wasn't in it then, but somehow he'd managed to replace me in every frame since. Back in the laundry room, my corner of exile, I sat down at the small folding table and pulled out my father's notebook. The cover was worn, the pages stiff from age. I flipped through notes in his careful handwriting, maintenance logs, property expenses, lists of names. One note caught my eye. Corbett, oversee transaction verification if anything ever changes ownership. I stared at it, the ink faded but legible. Dad had left me more than I realized. I took a deep breath and started planning. No more silence, no more reacting. I wrote down what I needed. Copies of the deed, the bank letters, every signature. I drafted a message to Ophelia and my siblings, not an emotional plea, but a timeline. Dates, facts, proof. Let them decide where they stood. I knew I couldn't outshout Laz, but I could outlast him. On the small monitor near the dryer, I watched the security feed. Laz walking through the kitchen, checking his reflection in the window, smirking as if the house itself had accepted him. I watched him like a man studying his opponent before a match. When the clock hit 10, I started drafting an email to Corbett at the bank. I hesitated before sending it, then my phone lit up. His name already there. I answered. "Blaze," he said quietly. "You asked for the full record. I finally have it ready." I gripped the phone tighter. "And? You might want to sit down," he said, "because what you're about to see, it didn't start with Laz." I closed the notebook, heart steady but heavy. "Show me everything," I said, because the truth wasn't just coming, it had been waiting. The night came heavy and still, the kind of silence that settles over a house that's been holding its breath too long. I sat in my small study, the yellow desk lamp barely touching the edges of the paper piles. On the wall, shadows of the blinds cut across the family photos, the same photos I now questioned for truth. In front of me lay the folder I'd been building for weeks. Receipts, scanned deeds, voice memos, video captures. Every page was another line in a story I hadn't chosen to tell, but was forced to finish. I flipped through them one by one, feeling the paper scrape my fingertips. Evidence, not just of fraud, but of erasure. Each signature mismatch, each timestamp that didn't belong. Dexter had sent over the latest batch, his message short and clear. "Everything's backed up in 3 places. You're ready." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling fan, turning slow circles, thinking about what ready meant. Ready to confront. Ready to lose whatever illusion was left. I opened a fresh document on my computer and began typing a letter. Not to the court, not yet, but to the people who still carried my last name. I kept it simple. This is what I've learned about our home, about what was done, and by whom. I'm not here to accuse, I'm here to show. My words looked plain on the screen, but the truth didn't need polish. It just needed daylight. By the time I finished, the clock read 6:42. The house was dim, that gray Oregon twilight pressing against the windows. I could hear faint laughter from the living room, Laz's voice among them, smooth, confident, like he owned the air itself. I called Dexter again, asked him to run a last sync of the files. "It's all mirrored," he said. "If they burn your house down, I'll still have it in 4 places." That made me smile. A tired, quiet smile. I wasn't afraid of fire anymore. This wasn't defense anymore. This was offense. The quiet kind. Later that evening, I invited them all to what I called a family peace night. I made sure it sounded harmless, even warm. Ophelia hesitated but agreed. My mother, ever the mediator, said she was glad I was finally softening. Laz looked suspicious, but curiosity is a weakness too. When the clock hit 7, the house smelled of coffee and lemon polish. I'd cleaned every inch of the living room myself, not out of pride, but because I needed control of the space. The projector sat ready against the far wall, my laptop connected, the folder open. They came in slowly. Ophelia first, arms crossed, mother behind her, holding that same small, cautious smile she used at church, and Laz, last, hands in his pockets, pretending to be relaxed. "Thank you for coming," I said, calm, steady. "I just wanted to share something." I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. The photo of our house from a few years back, sunlight, green lawn, my truck in the driveway. Then I clicked again. The next image was the same, except I wasn't in it. My place on the porch had been cut clean out, replaced by a patch of blurred siding. Ophelia frowned. Laz's jaw shifted. My mother looked confused at first, then something else. Recognition. "I thought this might interest you," I said. "It's from the family website Laz had rebuilt last winter. Notice anything missing?" Laz scoffed lightly, a small laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You're reading too much into a photo edit, Blaze. Maybe it just auto-cropped." "Auto-cropped my existence?" I asked softly. "That's efficient." The room went still. I advanced the slides and scanned copies of deeds, side-by-side signatures, 2 different dates with the same pen pressure. I kept my tone level, like I was teaching a class no one wanted to attend. Mother's hand went to her chest. "Where did you get all this?" "From the same house we share," I said. Only I was the one paying attention. Ophelia muttered, "You're trying to embarrass us in front of him," nodding toward Laz. I didn't flinch. "No, Ophelia. I'm trying to remind you who built this place before he moved in." Laz stepped forward. "You think this proves something? That you're the victim here? You always were dramatic." I met his stare. "Truth is heavy. Lies are built from air. You should feel the difference by now." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the clock on the mantel seemed to stop ticking. Then it broke. Ophelia's voice, sharp, shaking. "Enough, Blaze. You're not going to sit here and destroy what's left of this family," Mother whispered. "Stop, both of you." But her voice didn't carry weight anymore. Laz reached for the remote on the table, maybe to end the show. Instinct took over. I stepped forward, hand closing around it before he did. The movement was small, but it felt final. In the motion, something fell from his jacket pocket. A tan envelope, thick, unsealed, landing near my foot. We both froze. I bent down slowly and picked it up. My name wasn't on it, but the label was typed clearly across the front. "Final transfer, initial version." I looked up. Laz's face went pale. My mother gasped softly. Ophelia's eyes darted between us. The air tightened, heavy and sharp. I turned the envelope over in my hand, the flap trembling slightly between my fingers. "You thought I wouldn't find this?" My voice cracked, not from fear, but from clarity. "Watch me." I invited them all under soft lights and polite words. The Family Pride evening card lay on the table beside my phone, the ink barely dry. Neighbors, cousins, a few acquaintances, people who had shared Sunday meals here, answered the call without questioning. They walked in, greeted by Laz as if he already owned the place. His handshake was firm, his smile confident. I watched from the shadows, the guest in my own home, waiting for the moment. My speech was short. Unity, respect, truth. Just enough to steady the air and pull the tension taut. Eyes drifted, glances flickered between chairs. When it was time, Laz stepped forward. His chest was straight. "This house is under my name," he declared, voice loud and sure. "I rebuilt what was broken. Blaze let it decay." He ran a hand along the walls, gesturing to the furniture, the flooring, whatever his alteration might have touched. The room stirred. Gasps, murmurs. Ophelia's face twisted with conflict. Mother's lips parted, uncertain. I swallowed the anger that threatened to rise, held my stance. "You can never take what you never earned," I reminded myself silently. No one moved. The weight sat in the air, pressing. Then I asked Laz to pause. "Let me show you something," I said. Projector under low light, slides clicked on the big screen. First, a photo of the house, me on the porch. Next, same photo, me cropped out, gone. The room gasped. Laz's posture stiffened. Ophelia's eyes widened. I walked them through my evidence. The original deeds, my name stamped in ink, transaction records, forged signatures, audio files played, him admitting plans, manipulating trust. And then the envelope, final transfer, initial version, dropped into the frame. Cameras flashed. The room went silent. I quoted, "Truth doesn't need defense, only exposure." Laz opened his mouth, tried to interrupt. I raised my hand. He stopped. He turned. His face was pale. Without another word, he stormed out, slamming door. Ophelia wept softly. Mother clutched an old photo of me, lips quivering. Neighbors circled. Some whispered, "You owned this home before he claimed it." The crowd shifted toward me, eyes opening like doors. My name was no longer a murmur. It was spoken. I realized, tonight, narrative changed. Phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked down. A news alert. Local bank confirms title reversal under Blaze Caraway's name. The morning after felt different. The air was cooler, quieter, like the house itself was finally exhaling after years of holding its breath. I woke before the sun came up, not out of habit, but because something inside me wouldn't let me sleep in. The floorboards were still, the echoes of last night's crowd gone. Laz was nowhere to be found. Ophelia's door stayed closed. The coffee pot clicked on, and I poured a black cup. No sugar, no cream, the way my father used to take it. I stood on the porch, mug warming my hands, watching the first stripe of light cut through the horizon. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I thought about where I started, being told to sleep in the laundry room, to stay out of decisions that carried the family name. Now, I was standing on the porch of a home that had finally remembered who it belonged to. Victory doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's just the quiet that tells you it's over. The screen door creaked open behind me. My mother stepped out, her sweater pulled close. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside me. Then, gently, she placed her hand over mine. Her fingers trembled. "I stayed silent," she said, eyes on the yard, because I didn't think I had the right to speak. But silence, it hurt more than I thought it would. I didn't answer right away. I just let her talk. She told me how fear had shaped her decisions, how she'd chosen peace over truth, and how that peace had eaten away at her. "You deserved better from me," she whispered. For years I had imagined this conversation, angry, bitter, filled with blame. But it wasn't like that. It was quiet, tender, almost fragile. I wasn't sure forgiveness was the right word, but what I felt was close to it. Maybe it wasn't about forgiving. Maybe it was about understanding that we had both survived something that should have broken us. By late morning, the mail truck stopped at the gate. I walked down the driveway barefoot, the gravel biting softly at my feet. Among the usual envelopes, there was one without a return address. The paper felt old, the edges slightly curled. Inside, a note written in my father's handwriting, as shaky but unmistakable. My breath caught. It started with, "If this reaches you, then the truth has found its way home." There were instructions, small details about the property and his original will, the one before Laz had ever touched the paperwork. At the bottom, one line was underlined twice. I knew you'd be the one to stand firm. This home was always meant to be yours. I sat on the steps and read it again, slower this time. For years, I'd wanted him to say those words when he was alive. Now they came to me through paper, through distance, through time, but they still mattered. The ache behind my eyes told me so. That afternoon, I went up to the attic. Dust and sunlight drifted together like old memories. Boxes I hadn't opened in years waited in the corners. Inside were old family photos, my father's watch, the first set of tools he gave me when I turned 18. I sorted through them quietly, setting aside what was worth keeping. Laz's belongings went into a separate pile, the kind meant to be gone. Later that evening, I called a local shelter and asked if they'd accept donations. They said yes. It felt right, not out of spite, but out of release. When dinner came, I didn't plan anything fancy, just a few chairs around the kitchen table. My mother, Ophelia, she'd returned that afternoon, eyes softer, and two neighbors who had stood by me when things got dark. We shared roasted chicken, cornbread, and the kind of small laughter that doesn't need explanation. I raised my glass halfway through and said, "Family doesn't have to start over. Sometimes it just needs space to start right." My mother smiled, tears shining without falling. Ophelia nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Then let's start right." Later that night, when the dishes were washed and the lights dimmed, I stepped outside one more time. The air smelled like rain coming. The porch boards creaked under my weight, but they felt solid, stronger than I remembered. I checked the mailbox before heading in, not expecting much. Inside was another envelope. No return address, no seal, just one word scrawled across the front. Truth. I stood there in the dark, holding it, not ready to open it yet. Maybe I'd had enough truth for one lifetime, or maybe, just maybe, this one would lead me somewhere new.